What are the most and least important games for Mizzou football this season? Let's rank them 1 through 12 right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, I gotta wonder, is Missouri's pretty dominant NIL game starting to bleed over and negatively affect the basketball side just a little bit? And also, before I start the show, I do want to say today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So go to FanDuel.com to get started. And I do want to get started by talking about this Mizzou football schedule and talking about the most important games of the season. Let's start off with what to me is number one with a bullet. And I think it's very similar to the 2023 season, where week 2, I think, is going to set the table for the rest of the season, potentially. Of course, 2023, it was Harrison Mevis beating Kansas State with a last-second 60-plus yard field goal. This year, hopefully, it's not quite as dramatic, but the Kansas Jayhawks in week 2, in my mind, is the most important game on the schedule. Not only because of the rivalry, but because of how the rest of the schedule sets up for Missouri. So the bottom line is the return of this massive rivalry for Missouri in week 2 is a huge deal on just so many levels. And again, when you look at this schedule, you got Central Arkansas week 1, Louisiana sandwiching them being the bread, Kansas being the meat. And then you head to South Carolina, the South Carolina game, I should say. The Gamecocks are coming to Faurot Field. Well, the Tigers are not leaving Faurot Field until the month of October. So if we can hold serve at home here somehow with UMass coming to Faurot Field as well, that South Carolina game, if Missouri is 3-0, suddenly you're looking at a rematch from what was a heck of a competitive ball game last season. Yes, both teams, and especially Missouri, are going to look quite a bit different. But I'm telling you, you see that 10 next to South Carolina's name there. A lot can happen, of course, by week 3. But that is going to be quite the name to circle on your calendar. But you know what? I actually don't have the Gamecocks as my second most important game. I actually have them third, and believe it or not, I think Vanderbilt is the second most important game on this calendar. It's easy to forget that Missouri barely beat Vanderbilt last season in Columbia. So traveling down to Nashville, that's a game that Missouri just simply cannot afford to lose, in my opinion. So I've got South Carolina third in the pecking order. Fourth to me is Oklahoma. Tigers take down the Sooners last season in dramatic fashion, incredibly dramatic and unique fashion, as Zion Young gets the scoop and score. A fumble there from Jackson Arnold of Oklahoma, who's now at Auburn, by the way. They're going to come up here in just a little bit. But not only is this, once again, just like it was last season, hopefully a swing type of game for the Tigers, but I think most people, including myself, are pretty bullish on an Oklahoma comeback type of season. Now, the Sooners played a murderer's row type of schedule in their introduction to the SEC last season, so that's going to be the case once again. Just as Missouri's schedule was flipped home and away in conference, that's going to be the same thing for the Sooners and everyone else. So you hope by November 22nd, when the Tigers make their way to Norman, maybe the Sooners are worn out and demoralized a little bit, that type of thing, because I think there's a good chance over the years that when I think inevitably the conference expands its schedule from 8 to 9 games, I think the Sooners could be one of those 3 permanent opponent type of teams. In fact, I'd say that's pretty likely. So if Missouri can catch Oklahoma maybe once again while they're relatively down compared to their great history. What a huge win that would be for Missouri, not only for 2025, but to me in the coming seasons as well. Now, at this point, some of you are probably surprised that I don't have the Alabama Crimson Tide in my top 4. Well, guess what? I don't have them 5th either. I have the Texas A&M Aggies as the 5th most important game on the Missouri schedule. A home game, a return game from last season where Missouri was humiliated in College Station. That really wasn't literally or technically the end of Missouri's college football playoff chase. But that Saturday afternoon, it sure felt like it in a major way, and I don't know that Missouri ever totally recovered from that game. So with all that being said, you come back, this team, this coaching staff should be really motivated to come back and, well, especially against Mike Elko and a club that kind of went to some semi-dirty tactics off the field, I thought. Some dirty pool, darn it, when they took Brady Cook's comments about the noise at College Station out of context. But I guess all's fair in love and football. I can't really complain too much there. The point is, I just think Missouri owes Texas A&M a beating in Columbia this season. They whooped us bad the last time they were in Columbia too, so if we could turn that one around, I would sure enjoy it. But now, finally, we'll get to Alabama. And the reason I only have Alabama 6th in my pecking order here for the 2025 schedule is because I think, sure, there's tremendous upside in beating Alabama. I just don't think there's a ton of downside. I just don't think your perception when you lose to Alabama, even at home, even off of what is a down season for Alabama last season, relatively speaking, I just don't think nationally you're gonna take a huge hit from that one, especially if the Tigers are fighting for a college football playoff bid. And again, 10 wins, I think, in the regular season, 10-2 once again, I think is the magic number. Alabama is a loss I think you can afford to take. And then quickly, I think Auburn on the road, then Arkansas on the road as well. Those are my next 2, followed by Mississippi State, and then the 3 other non-conference games other than the Kansas Jayhawks. I'll just say quickly, again, Auburn and Arkansas both being on the road puts them a little bit farther down in the pecking order than they were last year, where they were much more in the must-win category, I would say, in 2024 at home. And, well, Missouri, while those were must-wins, just like the ball game against Oklahoma, it was very adventurous getting to the finish line there. So, obviously, every game in the SEC is hugely important here. This is all about relativity here, to be fair, folks. So, the only 3 obvious ones at the bottom are obviously the Ragin' Cajuns, UMass, and Central Arkansas. But really, the other 9, we can make a pretty good argument all day about any of them being ranked anywhere from 1 through 9. And if you're a little worried about the basketball transfer portal offseason for Dennis Gates in Missouri so far, well, football certainly doesn't seem to be having any problems. And I do think it's fair to at least wonder at this point if one is affecting the other. So let's talk about the behemoth that is Missouri football coming up in just a minute. But first, scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. And with Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries. They'll help you find not only talent, but the right talent, fast and easy. Hiring, posting a job is free and simple, and cost-effective growth as well. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So while some people, including myself, especially at the beginning of the portal process for Missouri basketball, We're disappointed with the returns. Maybe that's a bit unfair, and maybe that basketball, I'm starting to think, is suffering from comparison, which, as we all know, is often the thief of joy, but a comparison to the Mizzou football team and program that's obviously all in right now. The athletic department, NIL, everything else. If you look at, in fact, the Missouri transfer portal, just ranked by teams by On3.com. Previously, last season, Missouri's transfer portal heading into the year, their ranking was 9th in the country. Coming into this coming season in 2025, 7th in the country. So obviously take those rankings with a bit of a grain of salt, but I would say that the portal was very kind to Missouri last time, and I think it will be again. So a couple of top 10 rankings there. Compare that to basketball. Last season's crop that included Mark Mitchell, among others, 23rd in the country, according to On3. This past season so far, 70th. Now, that's a pretty stark drop-off, not only from season to season there, but obviously compared to what the football team's returns are. So if you're thinking, hey, here's some evidence that the athletic department cares a heck of a lot more about football than men's basketball, well, that's tough to argue with. It's really tough to argue with their logic. But then again, on the other hand, you got to stop yourself for a second and say, well, does this automatically, if this even is true, does this mean that Missouri basketball is doomed? I would say it doesn't. Because number one, you've got a decent starting point. And one thing about those transfer portal rankings, well, a lot of it is volume based. So if you have if you have 10 guys, 5 guys in your transfer portal class in basketball, say, versus 2 or 3, that's going to make a big difference in your overall rankings. And fortunately, I don't think that Missouri needed 5 more players, that type of thing. And for all the talk of, hey, Dennis Gates needs to play fewer guys, I think that was definitely the case against Drake in the NCAA tournament at times. Well, maybe that's going to be the case. Maybe Missouri doesn't need quite as much as the outside world would have expected. Yes, you'd love to get a Mark Mitchell type of addition every single cycle. I just don't know how realistic that was for the Missouri team this time. I think Sebastian Mack is going to be a really good addition to the Missouri team, perimeter-oriented, defensive-oriented type of guy. That's something that Missouri needed desperately down the stretch, was somebody who could get stops, a collection of guys who could get stops. And you know what? You put Mack out there with Anthony Robinson, with T.O. Barrett, maybe suddenly that perimeter defense is looking a lot better. So the big point here is, if you think football is overwhelming things a little bit, well, you're probably right, and it's also probably setting the expectations and the bar maybe at a bit of an unrealistic level for Missouri basketball, who doesn't necessarily need a star player next season. It'd be great if they got one, but I don't know how many true star players there are in the portal process each and every year. Kansas thought Hunter Dickinson was a star who was going to take them back to the promised land. Well, that didn't really happen, did it? So there are a lot of cautionary tales out there, and the point is, yes, football is way ahead on the pecking order than basketball right now, but it's far too early to just give up on a Missouri basketball team that nationally is expected to be on the right side of the bubble right now. I had a couple listeners saying, well, hey, it's not just enough to only be in the NCAA tournament. I agree. Over the long term, you're right. I don't want to just make the first round of the NCAA tournament year after year after year, but can Missouri at least get to that point before we start complaining about it, if that makes sense? I guess what I'm trying to say is, of course, ultimately you want to see the Dennis Gates regime and era progress. But I think there was a lot of progression this year. Did Missouri fall back at the little bit at the end of the season too? Yes, absolutely. But I just think you got to give it more time. I just think some of the panic I've seen or the negativity around Missouri basketball is a little bit overboard right now. And when it comes to the differences in the two sports, Gerard Hamilton over at Power Mizzou asked recently in one of his pieces, hey, what would you rather have, a good offense or a good defense? That type of thing. And the opposite being not so hot. In other words, hey, in Missouri, we've seen this before. We've seen great defenses that had terrible offenses on the other side and vice versa. And I'll just tell you this, my answer is different depending on which sport you're asking me about. Now, if you're asking me as a casual fan or, hey, all things being equal, well, I'd rather in a 6-6 mediocre season, hey, give me some points in both sports. I'd rather be entertained than bored, all things being equal in a mediocre season. But when it comes to actually winning the ball games, I do think there's a difference here. In basketball, give me the defense. Again, I'd rather see a 100-point game than a 50-point game, all things being equal. But I think long-term, you're going to want to have that defense, especially in a single elimination March Madness type of setup. So that is something that I think Dennis Gates needs to keep in mind, a guy who's established some really good offenses here at Missouri. Defenses, that still has yet to be the case. Now, interestingly, though, in football, I think it's the opposite. I think you actually would rather have a good offense than a good defense, all things being equal. I just think history tells you that you can count on an offense week to week a lot more than you can a defense. And there is something to, I've seen this over and over again too, a couple seasons, certainly the 2015 Missouri team 10 years ago that had a really good defense, 2019 as well, that had a really good defense that ultimately kind of started to wilt a little bit toward the end of the season, and just spiritually, you just stop being as effective defensively when you never get off the field, when your offense cannot sustain a drive. So for a whole bunch of different reasons, in basketball, if we're just talking wins and losses, give me the defense. Football, give me the offense. And you know what? Initially, after this recent NFL draft, I was surprised that Theo Weiss, the former Missouri receiver, was not drafted, but upon further and closer inspection, there was a pretty good reason that Theo wasn't drafted, I would say, and yet I still think he's got a shot to be a productive receiver at the NFL level. I'll tell you about all that here in just a minute, but first, with the NBA playoffs in full swing, well, there's no better time to get in on all the action than with a FanDuel. Before the tip-off and live, by the way, we're talking player props, same-game parlays, all kinds of stuff. I mean, honestly, the NBA, so much fun this time of year, and with all the swings and momentum, if you're locked into the game, there's some real opportunities there, in my opinion, for live betting. So, how could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet wins? Well, it's going to be pretty exciting. I can promise you that. So, are you new to FanDuel? It's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So obviously the NFL draft prognostication, just football scouting in general, is far from an exact science. It's probably a heck of a lot closer to alchemy, in fact. But I will say this, when you play in the SEC, it makes it quite a bit easier. You're playing against the best guys at that level of football you can possibly see. So when I see guys like Theo Weiss and Luther Burden getting open each and every week, especially Theo Weiss for this particular discussion, well, I tend to think that guy can play at the next level as well, and that is how I feel about Theo Weiss. But then I have to remind myself that age does matter, especially at the NFL level, and Theo is going to turn 24 years of age next month before his rookie year begins. So what does that mean? Well, most NFL wide receivers, if you have a long career, you start kind of tailing off around 30 years old or so, for the most part. Of course, there are exceptions to that. But I'll say for Theo Weiss, while that's a good reason to cap his upside, I would say, I think the film doesn't really lie, and I think he is a guy picked up, by the way, as an undrafted free agent by the Miami Dolphins. I think he's a guy who can stick around for at least a cup of coffee, say 3-4 seasons in the NFL, maybe be a productive player for a while. Certainly his relatively advanced age, we're talking NFL draft here, people, to be 24 again. That would be an exciting day. But seriously, 24, you can still play in the NFL. It's not as though he's a geezer. Obviously, it caps the upside a little bit. I just think he's a guy that proved he can be a productive player in the SEC. I think he can make somebody's NFL roster too. So good luck to Theo Weiss, and good luck to Luther Burden III, of course, as well. And he's basically a lock to make the Chicago Bears, of course. But it wouldn't hurt his value if maybe he returned some punts for the Bears this season too. And while Burden's effectiveness as a punt returner kind of came and went, I would say, during his time at Missouri, he was fairly sure-handed, at least for the most part. So I do think there's a definite opportunity. I think Burden will try at the very least. I think he'll probably lobby as a rookie, trying to earn his stripes and prove himself at the next level here. I think he'll probably lobby to be the Bears punt returner in his rookie season. If he ends up being the player that I think he can be, that will probably be a one season type of opportunity if Burden is really that good, because, man, being a punt returner in the NFL is often a frightening job. And that'll do it for this edition of Locked On Mizzou. Thanks for making it your first listen today. For your second listen, check out The Portal Show with the Scoutmaster Brian Smith. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, I am John Miller. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mizzou.